So I recently saw Alien Romulus. It's obviously been dividing fans ever since its release, and sadly, I'm on the side of being upset by it. Just by itself, I thought it was kind of mediocre, but after it repeated the problems I had with the prior Alien films, it caused me to look at the entire franchise's future with pessimism. I then realized that the Alien franchise just isn't for me anymore, so I've decided to step away from it. But before I explain why, I need to make this clear to all of you Romulus fans. I am not one of those toxic Romulus haters who thinks that you're stupid for liking it. Those guys really annoy me too, and they make me look bad. I'm glad Romulus has worked out so well for you. This is your franchise now. It's a great time for you to be an Alien fan, so enjoy it for me. And also, to prove I'm not a toxic fan, I have a long history of learning to like bold directions that initially hurt me. I'm looking at you, Last of Us Part 2 in Glass. So I've been applying that mindset to the Alien franchise ever since Prometheus. But after Romulus, 12 years of it, I just can't do it anymore. I see where Alien is going now and I don't want it anymore. The other thing that hurts is seeing the Alien fanbase turn toxic just like the Star Wars fanbase. But it's also easy to see why that's happened because, in my opinion, the last 3 Alien films have copied the Disney trilogy's flaws almost perfectly. But I'll talk about that at the end of this video. For now, let's talk Alien. I'll mainly be talking about Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and Alien Romulus. I might sound more negative than I mean to, but remember, this is not an in-depth review of those films. I'm mainly focusing on what caused me to quit the franchise, so forgive me if I sound like Mr. Negative. Let's get into it. Big spoilers up ahead. So, let me quickly give my thoughts on all of the Alien movies before Prometheus. I have nothing new to say about the first 2, complete masterpieces that have to be somewhere in my top 10 favorite films of all time, standard. I get the hatred for Alien 3, but I make no apologies in saying that I love it. I really appreciate its unique atmosphere and weird direction. And unlike most Alien fans, Resurrection does not remotely offend me either, because I don't see it as canon. There's no way I can watch the first lot of Alien films and believe that one day Ripley will get cloned and the atmosphere will become this silly and goofy. Looking at it as nothing more than expensive fanfiction, I have fun with Resurrection. The same goes for the 2 Alien vs. Predator films. I don't find them offensive either because they weren't even made to be canon. The first one is mediocre fun and Requiem, meh. So now, Prometheus. After the last 3 weird Alien films, Prometheus was a breath of fresh air for me. It's one of the most interesting and original entries in a horror franchise ever. I get the hatred for it. It mostly ditched the Xenomorph to explore creationism and religious themes, but I thought that was very ballsy. I loved it. However, Prometheus had a series of problems both in and behind the scenes. As of now, in September 2024, they have only remained and grown. You see, if you read all of the interviews with Ridley Scott and all the writers, you'll see that they didn't know if Prometheus was an Alien prequel or spin-off. They kept changing their minds. That's a clear sign that they didn't know what type of story they were telling, nor where the story was going. And that's a huge problem because with a story like Prometheus, you need a plan. The story is built with questions that were designed to be answered, but it's clear they never had any in mind. And that's why Prometheus ended with a cliffhanger, hoping that the sequel would clean up its mess. That lack of plan is even worse than when they began shooting Alien 3 before finishing the script. That was just a monster movie. Prometheus was so much more, so I can't believe they repeated that mistake. Just wow. The story also tainted and undermined parts of the original lore. The new black goo lore was interesting and led to some cool moments, but it was way too random, and stating that both humans and xenomorphs come from it, making us distant cousins? No, I couldn't stand it. I also hated how they retconned the space jockey. The space jockey's look was meant to be its organic look, but fossilized. That slow zoom into the space jockey's face was showing us an alien's last expression as a xenomorph popped out of its chest. Even the comic books and games stayed faithful to this original look, but Prometheus couldn't do that. It retconned the space jockey's look into just being a flight suit worn by engineers, a race of giant, bold humans. Ouch. Look, it was cool discovering that the elephant's nose connecting to the chest was an oxygen tube. That's kind of cool. But it's still a boring answer for an iconic mystery. Plus, it was also implied back in the first Alien film that the space jockeys made the xenomorphs because they slightly resembled the space jockeys. I mean, look at the chest. Maybe the space jockeys used their DNA to make a bioweapon or something? That was a cool idea, but that's out the window now, so it makes no sense why the xenomorphs slightly resemble engineer suits. Meh. It's clear that Prometheus's new ideas didn't fit with the old lore, but I still adjusted, buried my inner toxic fan, and accepted these flaws. I ended up loving Prometheus. But then Alien Covenant came out and made me retroactively like Prometheus less. I always enjoyed Covenant for its strange atmosphere and David's scenes, but it also abandoned most of Prometheus's unanswered questions. Yet again, not learning from Alien 3, Shaw and the engineers are killed before the film even begins. All of the arcs and questions we were attached to,
they created us, then they tried to kill us. I deserve to know why.
Get thrown away, making Prometheus feel kind of pointless and our loyalty feel disrespected. So to please fans, they abandoned Prometheus's questions to answer a completely different one. Who made the xenomorphs? And by answering that question, Covenant gave us no clarity and only caused more confusion. Covenant states that David used the black goo to create the xenomorphs as we know and love them. This is meant to be the first egg with the first facehugger. He created them. Sorry, no he did not. First of all, in Prometheus, there's a mural. It clearly shows a classic xenomorph type, possibly a queen above it, and two huge facehuggers attacking engineers. There may be some differences, but it's clear they existed long before David, quote unquote, created them. And secondly, Alien Covenant is set just 20 years before Alien, but in Alien, the space jockey clearly died from a xenomorph popping out of its chest, and it was fossilized. It had been dead for thousands to millions of years. Yet David was the one who created the xenomorphs just 20 years before Alien?
Nope.
So unless time travel eventually becomes a part of these films, I hope that never happens, but anything's possible. This is a major plot hole. And sadly, it gets worse. According to the original script and novelization, David didn't create the xenomorphs. The engineers did. David just reverse engineered their formula. Now I definitely like that idea, it makes the mural and space jockey make sense, but that detail was never stated in Covenant, so no one knows which idea is canon. And apparently, David's first xenomorph isn't even a xenomorph, it's a praetomorph. I don't know what that means, it's the same bloody creature, why does it have a different name? I don't know. Ridley Scott seems to think it's a xenomorph, and that David created them.
The engineers didn't make him, David made him, which I thought was far more interesting.
So just like Prometheus, the studio had no clue what type of story they were telling. They didn't know what was canon and what was not. They didn't understand what was going on. There was no real plan. So we ended up with these two weird films. Old lore was retconned, questions didn't get answers, answers didn't fit with questions, and continuity errors were up to the eyeballs. After another cliffhanger, the third film was put on hold indefinitely, and it looked like we'd never get to the end of this beautiful mess. So as a result, I, and many fans, just accepted that Prometheus and Covenant were not canon anymore. We appreciated them, but we also saw them as very unique experiments that went wrong. So we decided to sweep them under the carpet and look forward to more Alien films. Enter Alien Romulus. Romulus is set between Alien and Aliens, and unlike the previous two films, Ridley Scott did not come back as the director. He produced this. That was the right move, until it wasn't, but I'll get into that in a bit. I appreciated how Romulus was much more of a straightforward Alien film, but I still found most of it to just be serviceable, with some great parts. It was okay. But then Big Chap came back, the original Xenomorph from Alien, and as far-fetched as it was, I actually loved this. It's a big retcon, but this was a retcon that actually added to my fandom. This caused me to reflect upon that ending and think, wow, that wasn't the end. Xenomorphs really are almost unstoppable. And the new lore details, the cocoon in space, finding out how the space huggers find their prey, were great expansions of the lore. I just wish Big Chap wasn't killed before the movie began. Stop doing that. But I was still very happy with this. I began loving Romulus, but then it connected to Prometheus and Covenant, and stated that they were indeed canon.
Oh shit, here we go again.
We learned that the Romulus ship wanted the black goo inside of Big Chap to improve human DNA. Okay, so it is cool how we finally know now why Weyland Yutani were so desperate to experiment on xenomorphs. They wanted to reverse engineer the black goo to enhance their own biological warfare. But those are not the holes we needed filling in. When Romulus revived those last two films, it also revived their questions, and the lack of answers became even more frustrating to me. Especially when you consider that I now had more questions, like, why did Romulus have to find Big Chap floating through space instead of following the space jockey's distress call, leading them to the eggs? Right? Whatever. Maybe there is an answer, you guys will have to let me know, but it's annoying. But then, it's implied that the scientists used the black goo in Big Chap's DNA to clone facehuggers. Facehuggers used to create xenomorphs, but now it's the other way around. It makes the queen redundant. You don't need a queen to lay eggs and create facehuggers. You just need one xenomorph and the black goo inside of it. That's not expanding the old lore, that's attacking it.
Yikes.
And why Big Chap? The queen suffered the same fate as Big Chap, so why couldn't this be set after Aliens and they just replace Big Chap with the queen? That way the queen could lay eggs leading to all of the facehuggers, right? Well, the answer is Ridley Scott. He's famously denounced the queen, so he forced director Fede Alvarez to follow his lead. No queens, it has to be Big Chap, the monster from my first film, and we're gonna use the black goo from my films Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And he also made sure that an Ash clone would end up in Romulus too. Yikes. Ridley Scott, I adore you, man. Your work will never be forgotten. It doesn't have the ability to be forgotten. But why would you undermine the old lore like that, especially when all of the fans love it? Like, why would you connect this film to the last two films when the whole reason for this film's existence is because those films didn't work? And you still don't have any of the answers for all of your old questions, and yet you're still gonna make them valid? Ugh. Then, of course, the dreaded black goo had to leave a lasting impression by creating The Offspring. I don't despise it like plenty do. I actually appreciate the impressive imagery and practical effects. It's just that the sequence itself bored me. I didn't care about any of the characters involved. And it's just another arbitrary black goo monster. No thank you. But my biggest problem with it? The Offspring mostly resembles an engineer. Why? Because according to Fede Alvarez, The black goo originally created the engineers too. That was never meant to be a thing. The engineers were the ones who created the black goo, not the other way around. It's just another retcon. Yet again, we have another Alien film where the people behind the scenes can't decide what's canon and what's not. They still continue to prove that they don't understand the lore in their own films. There is no true plan. Holy crud. So I left the cinema, got home, and felt crushed. Just by itself, Romulus was mostly just okay to me, but the black goo's return really wound me up. But I couldn't work out why. Was it because I was a toxic fan who couldn't take new directions? Well, considering how supportive I was since Prometheus' new directions, the answer was clearly no. So what was it? I then spent weeks analysing the films and I finally found my answers. It wasn't just the fact that Romulus revived Prometheus and Covenant's mysteries, which I doubt we'll ever get to the end of, by the way. It was also realizing just how layered the flaws of this new lore was. Let me explain. When writers create lore, like magic for example, they can't just allow it to do anything. They have to give it rules and limitations.
If you're killed in the Matrix, you die here.
The body cannot live without the mind.
Why? Because we as humans are bound by rules and limitations. So when there's a law to the lore, we can buy into it. We can almost see ourselves in it. And this is why the Xenomorph's life cycle and lore is so iconic. Even though there are almost limitless possibilities for Xenomorph types, because they inherit the DNA of their hosts, they're still bound by rules and limitations. They all have a similar look and they function similarly too. Even the trashy films made it make sense. As dumb as Resurrection was, its half human, half alien lore made you understand how the Queen could give birth like that and push out a human-alien hybrid. Again, that silly fun is not canon to me, but its lore did make sense and had rules to follow. AVP did the same thing. It still had rules. Romulus carried this over too. Big Chap surviving in space was very OP, but it still had limitations. Big Chap couldn't just fly through space at its own free will, right? It couldn't smell Ripley through space and chase after her for some vengeance. Romulus was smart enough to still give it limitations. As a result, the Xenomorph's life cycle is a believable lore. And you know what proves that? It was inspired by the parasitoid wasp's life cycle. They lay their eggs in other insects. It's horrible. So no wonder we can buy into this lore. It's inspired by something from our world. But Prometheus introduced the new black goo lore. And it might be inspired by evolution as we know it, but it still feels more like magic than some type of biology. And this isn't the type of magic like Aladdin's 3 Wishes, where it has rules and limitations. This magic can do anything. As a limited human, I can't buy into it. Now, I do see the goo's strengths. It can lead to some cool sequences and it can be quite unpredictable. So I was interested at first to see how it could be used, but as the films went on, I realized that the goo was just a lazy plot device to justify perfunctory nonsense. Why does it sometimes infect you and other times turn you into a zombie?
Because it's the black goo, that's what it does.
Why does it create squids? Why does it create both humans and xenomorph variants? How does it almost instantly turn an unborn baby into an engineer hybrid?
Because it's the black goo and that's what it does.
Why does the offspring grow so quickly and almost instantly smile like an evil villain because it realized,
I'm the bad guy of this movie and I like hurting people? Well, the answer is it's the black goo and that's all you need to know.
Well, fantastic. I'm glad you guys think so, but to me, it's a lazy, all-encompassing answer for any question that we may have. It's a writer's excuse. The writers and the producers clearly couldn't work in harmony nor create an entire world or story that they could understand. So they created a lore with no rules they had to follow, freeing them to do whatever they wanted. They could make any type of monster with any type of scenario, and if they ever backed themselves into a corner, they could rely on the goo to get them out. And that is not good lore. Good lore is supposed to be the story's backbone, but the black goo is not a backbone. It's silly string, squirting all over the place instead of holding it all together. The writers have tried to convince us that the black goo is something
too deep and intricate to be explained or understood.
but I'm afraid I'm not buying that. The only things deep or intricate about this goo are the layers of problems it created. The black goo is the perfect manifestation of the writer's creative mindsets when making these films. The black goo does whatever it wants, and it destroys as it creates, just like the writers. So no wonder their films do the same thing. They're tonally and structurally all over the place. They can't decide what to keep or let go. They can't decide what matters and what doesn't, and they keep undermining the old lore. Remember the space jockey? It was actually an engineer's flight suit. Okay, what are you gonna do with that retcon? Nothing. Oh, okay. All of the questions we were hooked to, don't matter anymore. Shaw's backstory and arc don't matter. She's dead. Remember when the Xenomorph was an alien? Well, no, it's actually your distant blood relative. It's like a space cousin, because the black goo created it as well as humans. Did David create the Xenomorphs or not? And is this actually a Xenomorph or a Praetomorph? We don't know, because none of the people behind the scenes know what the hell's going on. Why all of these monsters?
It's the black goo, and that's all you need to know.
Will we ever get to the end of David's arc?
There's so much here that doesn't make sense.
It really is like the black goo itself made these films. And it's not ironic on purpose, it's just the end result of the studio not planning before executing. And the proof is in all of the interviews for these films. They just didn't know what type of story they were telling. Who created the Xenomorphs was a question that didn't even need to be asked, let alone answered. But then we got an answer that didn't fit with the question. And the studio can't decide if the answer even is the answer.
The engineers didn't make him, David made him.
And then we got more questions that did need answers. Some of those questions did not get answers, and some of those questions did get answers. That came with more questions. And those questions will most likely never be answered, which is terrible because the whole quality of this news story is dependent on getting answers.
Scooby-Doo's less confused than you prick.
This is awful. And even though Romulus is much more straightforward, it still spread this disease. The old law had rules, but they've now been broken by this new law, which doesn't even have any rules to break. So what else are these films going to retcon or forget in the future? They abandon their own details and characters, let alone the old stuff. It's not even loyal to itself, so nothing is safe. And for me, that's only going to get worse. I can't see how it can be fixed, not unless we get a sequel that retcons it all, like Halloween 2018 or Terminator Dark Fate, but that won't happen. Because most people seem to like the black goo returning in Romulus, so it's here to stay, and I hate that. I'm all for the franchise expanding and growing, but with the black goo, it seems to want to destroy all of the old lore and itself as it does so. I believe it won't be long until the Queen gets deleted, or they try and retcon Ripley into having some type of mystical background that made her destined to be a hero or something. Or they might use the goo to go back in time. I don't know, I wouldn't be too surprised if that stupidity happened, and none of that is for me. I highly doubt we'll get to the end of David's arc ever, but if we do, I bet it won't hold up under scrutiny. So it feels like a wasted journey for me. I would like to see Neil Blomkamp's version of Alien 3, and a new AVP sounds pretty good to me. Other than that, I'm just not excited for the future. And I know fans are excited for the upcoming TV show Alien Earth, which will be set 30 years before Alien. But for me, placing Xenomorphs on Earth will undermine Ripley's arc. She killed herself to keep them away from Earth, but this show will state that they already once were on Earth, so no thank you. Add to that, if the Xenomorphs were really on Earth 30 years before Alien, and Alien Covenant is set just 20 years before Alien, then David didn't really create the fucking xenomorphs, did he?
David made him.
Sorry, Ridley. And the question I have to ask after realizing all of this is, how the hell did we get here? The old Xenomorph's life cycle already had almost infinite possibilities for cool movies. There were so many obvious ways to expand the lore. They could have showed us how a queen becomes a queen, or if the queen has a king, or they could have just put facehuggers on different animals and gave us something mental. A xenomorph bird? Could it fly, right? An octopus? Or a shark? Rhino? And if they somehow ran out of animals, then why not make up an entirely new alien species for the xenomorphs to pop out of, right? I mean, the comic books and video games had an army of different xenomorphs. In the Batman/Aliens comic, we got a crocodile xenomorph. Batman got it right. They could have pulled from any of those sources, and as random as all of that may sound, there was still lore to the lore, limitations and rules, so it still could have worked and fit with the old films. Sadly, they haven't done that in a long time. In the original pure xenomorph life cycle, the only real variants we've had were the dog/ox xenomorph from 3 and the pred alien from Requiem, and of course the queen. That's it.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
In 45 years, that is all we've had. They weren't stuck. How the fuck did they run out of ideas and decide to go in this black goo direction? I don't know how we got here, but we are here now, and I just don't want it. The Alien franchise is not for me anymore. Not because I'm too smart for it, not because I can't accept that my beloved franchise is growing up, oh no. It's because it simply doesn't make sense to me anymore, and it's twisted the old lore into something that I consider to be quite stupid. I really did try. No matter how many times these films kept disrespecting the older films, I kept adapting my own tastes to enjoy them. But after Romulus, 12 years of this, I realized that it was all just Stockholm Syndrome. I was trying to soften the blows of the promises these new films didn't keep. And I don't see how it can fix itself, nor do I see why I should remain loyal to something that isn't even loyal to itself. So I won't. To me, all of this new stuff is not canon, the same as Resurrection in the AVP films. But whereas I can have fun with those films, and they don't take themselves seriously, these films frustrate me and do take themselves seriously. So I'm done. The black goo does not exist to me, and this is not a flight suit worn by a race of giant Jason Stathams. I really appreciate the attempt to turn the Alien franchise into something bigger, but they clearly didn't plan it out, so now it's a bit of a mess. I sadly, retroactively, enjoy Prometheus and Covenant less than I used to. I was always a fan of them, and I still kind of am, but it just hurts. If you ever catch me reviewing newer Alien entries somewhere down the road, it will most likely be because I've seen them out of curiosity, rather than hoping for something that makes sense.
Well, that sucks.
I have one last point to make. The last 3 Alien films really do remind me of the recent Star Wars trilogy from Disney, Force Awakens to Rise of Skywalker. When Disney made those films, they did not have an ending in mind. They were making it up as they were going along, just like in Prometheus. The old Xenomorph lore is like the old heroes, and the new black goo is Rey, an overpowered badass who has no weaknesses or limitations. She takes over, and the old characters get thrown away. We get forced callbacks and fan service.
I know. You bitch.
And even bad CGI de-aging. And just like the Emperor, the 3rd film retcons the death of the main villain, and the novelization of Rise of Skywalker contradicted the main movie's information by stating that Palpatine was a clone, which is just like the novelization of Covenant stating that David did not create the Xenomorphs, he just copied the engineer's formula. Holy crap, no wonder the Alien fanbase has become toxic just like the Star Wars fanbase. And you expect me to remain optimistic about Disney making future Alien content?
No.
Aye. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay jiggy. The badger appreciates ya.